I have what's called a nonverbal learning disability, which is somewhat related to Asperger's syndrome but has different features. The disability tends to affect the ability to read social cues that aren't verbal, so body language, sarcasm, things like that. It also impacts processing speed, coordination, and the ability to differentiate directions, such as north from south or left from right. As far as common misconceptions, I think that the biggest one I have to contend with or have had to contend with at school is that learning disabilities are generally language-based, and mine is not. I can understand why people might think that because 80% of learning disabilities are actually language-based, but mine has to do with anything that can't be presented verbally, so anything that is presented in visual spatial terms and not explained verbally, like music theory or math. And I think that can be difficult, I think, for some people to grasp as a learning problem, of it as a language thing. And I think the second thing that I've dealt with in terms of misconceptions is probably just that learning disabilities aren't real, or that people use them to get special perks or breaks and things like that. People with NVLD tend to take things more literally, or to be very, very honest, and to sort of mean what you say, do what you mean, and I think that's a good thing. I think that, my disability has enabled me to be a little bit willing to go against the norm. I think it helped me not be so susceptible to peer pressure growing up, and that's been a good thing. I guess in terms of my social life, it affects basically the character of my social life, in that I tend to have a few close friends rather than, several like surface friends, which generally I think is a good thing. However, it can be painful, I think, for people with my disability who are in that situation, because the fewer friends you have, the more attached to them you are, and so when friendships end or someone dies, it can be very traumatic, more than it might be for somebody else. The one thing that it would be helpful if people knew is that I talk to myself because I need to process things, and it's actually not a symptom of schizophrenia or mental imbalance, which has been a problem on some occasions as I've gone out in public and people have called the police because they think that I'm confused or in need of help, and so that can be frustrating. I mean, I guess that's compassionate, but it can be kind of a pain. I guess the other thing, I think more than people learning about my disability specifically, is there needs to be a greater social awareness of disabilities in general. I think that diversity programs need to recognize disabilities as constituting a minority of the population, and to be promoting tolerance towards people with disabilities in general, because I think there's a lot of unconscious prejudice that just adversely affects understanding. I think that in some ways, by some people I feel understood. I'd say generally not really, or at least in terms of how my disability affects me. I think that a lot of times having that disability can make you appear inconsiderate when you're not trying to be. For instance, like, students with my disability have to go get a lot of clarification from professors, and I think that makes it seem like sometimes we're just not thinking about the professor's time, or maybe the other students need their time, but that's not actually the case. I'd say in terms of changing since I've been at Gordon, I'd say the change in my life took place just before I came to Gordon in my senior year of high school. I learned that I needed to be more assertive about my rights as a disabled person. I kind of learned that sometimes turn the other cheek is not the best policy, at least in how you deal with situations. You always forgive, but I've learned that you do have to stand up for yourself, and so I've become more assertive since I've been here, which I think is interesting. I mean, people used to tell me at school that our teachers used to say, you're too nice, and thus you can't have a learning problem, which just tells you about how people think of people with disabilities. But now no one says that, so I guess I'm not as nice. How does it feel to be a Christian with my disability? I think that sometimes it's made my faith a lot deeper in God, because when I was a child, I experienced a lot of harassment and abuse at the hands of my peers, and so I learned to look at God as like the ultimate accepting entity, and so relied on Him a lot. I think that, having a really close relationship with God and relying on Him can sometimes make you more vulnerable to like people questioning your faith, but nonetheless, my faith has remained strong.